Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for joining me for the Units of Measure Lightning webinar. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes just to see that we get everybody who's registered, or at least everyone who'd like to attend. We'll give it a couple more minutes in case someone's late. But yes, feel free to say hi in the chats. I'm sure we've got, oh, nice. Very nice to see you, Marguerite. But yeah, feel free to say hi and introduce yourselves. And I'll be having my colleague Carisha also here moderating. She'll be able to help with any questions that you guys have during the webinar.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi. I probably won't be on camera, but I'll be in the chat.
Awesome. Always great to see you. And yeah, so this is a new webinar series that we've got. It's a lightning webinar, so it's not going to be too long. Just a very quick walkthrough of our features. So look out for those in the future. And we do have some other full-length webinars coming up as well. And you can always register and see what we have coming up on our webinars page as well. So I think we'll get started now. So, and hey, Katie, nice to see you too. But yes, so let's get started with units of measure. So units of measure, they're going to be important if you are selling or purchasing your products at a different unit than you store it in. So we'll go through a couple of examples just to show that, as well as go through the setup process of how to set up your units of measure. So let's get started. So before we jump into the demo, just a few terms that we should look at just to get an understanding of how units of measure work in inFlow. So the first term that's important to note is the standard unit of measure. So this is going to be the unit that you stock in, and it's the unit that you are most interested in keeping track of. So as an example, if you work in a bakery and you bake bread, for example, and you are interested in knowing how much flour you have in stock. For you, it might be really important to know how much flour you have in pounds at any given time. So your standard unit of measure will be pounds. And when you are baking bread, for example, and bread here is the finished product. So if you are manufacturing, for example, your standard unit of measure is what's going to be used in your bill of materials. So for example, we have our bread is our finished product, and the flour is a component. When you create a bill of materials for your bread, you're going to tell inFlow how much flour you need to make one loaf of bread in your standard unit of measure, so in pounds. And your standard unit of measure is also going to be what's used in reports. So whenever you're running an inventory report, for example, inFlow is going to generate the data in your standard unit of measure. And in this case, if we're using the flour example, inFlow is going to generate a report in pounds for your flour product. And then your sales unit of measure is going to be the unit that you sell in. And this is important to tell inFlow if it's different than your standard unit of measure. So if we take the flour example, so my standard unit of measure might be pounds, but let's say I also sell flour to my customers, and to my customers I sell it in boxes. So my sales unit of measure will be box, and you'll need to tell inFlow the conversion. So how much of your standard unit of measure goes into a sales unit of measure. So perhaps each box has 2 pounds of flour. So we'll go through that and how to show inFlow the conversion. But essentially, whenever you create a sales order, that order is going to be created using your sales unit of measure. And when you fulfill that order, inFlow will convert it to your standard unit of measures. So essentially, you're always getting your unit or your standard unit of measure as your quantity that you're keeping track of. And similarly, your purchasing unit of measure is going to be the unit of measure that you purchase from your vendor. So taking that same example, perhaps my vendor sells me flour in batches. And so you'll have to tell inFlow how many of your standard unit of measure goes into each of your purchasing unit of measure. So in this case, maybe each batch has 20 pounds of flour. So anytime that you create a purchase order, inFlow will use your purchasing unit of measure, and when receiving that purchase order, inFlow will convert it to your standard unit of measure, so that you're always getting a accurate shot of your standard unit of measure of how much you have in stock, in this case, in pounds for our flour example. So now let's go through a couple of examples. The first example we'll do is, if you can imagine, we sell soda pop in this case, and it so happens that my vendor only sells me the soda pop in cases. So my purchasing unit of measure is case, and each case has 24 bottles. But I'm interested in knowing how many individual bottles I have in stock at all time. So my standard unit of measure is bottle. And then finally, my sales unit of measure is also bottle. So in this case, I also sell to my customers individual bottles. So my sales and standard unit of measure are the same in this example. And then we'll also look at a second example where it's going to be very similar to the first. And our purchasing unit of measure again is going to be case. So my vendor sells one case with 24 bottles. My standard unit of measure is going to be, again, individual bottles. So it'll be set to bottles. And then in this case, the sales unit of measure is going to be pack. So in this example, I'll be selling to my customers in packs, and one pack has 4 bottles. So we're going to go through how to set this up in inFlow so that when you are creating purchase orders or sales orders, inFlow is using the correct unit of measure and is also converting the cost and the retail price for the unit of measure selected. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so there are 2 ways that you can set up your unit of measure. You can either do it from the Windows desktop app, as I have here. That's what we're looking at right now. You'll also be able to set it up from the web app, and we'll take a look at that briefly as well, but it'll be a similar process. Okay, so I've got my product here, soda pop, and I would like to set up the units of measure for it. For those 2 examples, we'll start with that first example we talked about. So when you're setting up your units of measure, you're going to go to the extra info tab along the bottom there, and you'll see your unit of measure displayed right here in the right corner. Now, if you're ever in doubt about what each of these terms mean, you can always hover your mouse over top of the term, and you'll see a little tooltip with a description of what that term does and what it means. So in this case, we'll start with our standard unit of measure. So again, this is the unit that you're stocking in and most interested in keeping track of. So in this case, my standard unit of measure is a bottle because from the first example and the second one, I'm interested in knowing how many individual bottles I have in stock. So, and before I type that in, you can actually select a unit of measure from the dropdown, but you might not see your specific unit of measure if you're using something more customized, for example. And that's okay. You can actually type in the unit of measure directly into the dropdown. So in this case, I can't, there's no bottles here as part of the presets. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in bottle. And that's my standard unit of measure. Now, taking the first example where I sell my bottles in individual units as well, that means the standard and sales unit of measure are the same. So I can keep this blank. I don't need to change that. inFlow will just create a sales order using my standard unit of measure, and it's the same. So we don't have to change that. Now, our purchasing unit of measure is different from our standard unit of measure. If we can recall, we purchase our bottles in cases of 24 bottles. So let's go ahead and tell inFlow that we purchase it in cases, and there is a preset here. And then you'll see the conversion pop up. So this is where you're going to tell inFlow how many of your standard units of measure go into the purchasing unit of measure. So in one case, we have 24 bottles. So let's go ahead and save that. And perfect, there we go. So we've set up our unit of measure. So what that might mean is whenever we create a purchase order, inFlow is going to use that purchasing unit of measure. And you might be wondering how this affects cost. So when you go to the product info tab here, there is the cost field. And in this field, inFlow is wanting the cost, is looking for the cost of an individual unit. So for your standard unit of measure, sorry. So you're going to place your standard unit of measure cost here. So in this case, my standard unit of measure is an individual bottle. So that might be, in my case, $1 per bottle. But you might also have different vendors that you purchase from. And in that case, you might want to add them to the product vendors tab. So for example, I have a vendor called Soda Emporium. And in this case, you're going to put in the vendor price here, and this vendor price is going to be for the purchasing unit of measure. So our purchasing unit of measure is a case. So we're going to enter our vendor price as the price for a case. So in this case, the vendor sells me a case for $20. I'll probably use a different word for that. But anyway, so each case for Soda Emporium cost me $20. I might have another vendor, let's say Pop Emporium, and they'll sell me a case for $22. So that's a little bit different than this cost here. So if we ever create a purchase order for either of these vendors, inFlow will use the vendor price that's listed in the product vendor tab instead of the cost tab here. But the thing to take away here is that the cost in the product info tab is for your standard unit of measure. So this is, in our case, per bottle. And the product vendor tab, vendor's price is going to be per purchasing unit of measure. So this is going to be on a per case basis. So let's go ahead and purchase our product. So I'm going to go ahead and create a purchase order. And you can do that by clicking buy at the top of the taskbar. So here we go. So automatically inFlow will convert the purchase order to our purchasing unit of measure, which in this instance is a case. So one case, and it takes the unit price. So it converts our cost of $1 per bottle to our case cost. So 1 times 24 is $24. But as I mentioned, if you have specific vendors or different vendors for a product and they have special pricing or their specific pricing, whenever you select them from as the vendor, inFlow will automatically pull in their vendor price for that purchasing unit of measure. So it would be $20 for Soda Emporium, for example. So as I mentioned, when you receive a purchase order, so let's go ahead and receive it. So fulfilled, we're going to click fulfilled. inFlow is going to convert that to your standard unit of measure. So again, one case, 24 bottles come into stock. So let's go ahead and save that. So if we go back to our product, we now have 24 bottles in stock. So your standard unit of measure is going to be the important one here. And similarly, if we sell the product, we're going to use this normal price. This is our basically the price that we use to sell to our customers. And this normal price is going to go by your sales unit of measure. So our sales unit of measure in this case is bottle. It's the same thing as our standard unit of measure. So we're going to enter the retail price of a single bottle. In this case, it might be $2. So that whenever I create a sales order, inFlow is going to pull this retail price for that unit of measure, for the sales unit of measure. So one bottle is $2. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this order now. And we'll keep this purchase order. So we still have 24 bottles in stock. But let's go ahead and jump to our second example where our sales unit of measure is different from our standard unit of measure. So if we can recall our second example, I sell packs of 4 bottles to my customers. So my sales unit of measure is going to be packs. So let's go ahead and select that. And here we go. The conversion is going to be 1 packs is equal to 4 bottles. So as I mentioned, the retail price, this one here, is going to go by the sales unit of measure. So it's important then to update the retail price to reflect our new sales unit of measure. So my pack of 4 might cost $8 this time. So let's go ahead and update that. So when we save it, And when we sell that product, inFlow will now use the sales unit of measure of 1 pack, and it takes the unit price that we just set. So essentially, inFlow is doing that conversion for you. So whenever you fulfill that order, so let's go ahead and fulfill it. We'll select a customer here. And let's go ahead and fulfill the order. So 1 packs. And if we go to the Fulfill tab, we'll see that it converted it to 4 bottles. So it's always converting back to your standard unit of measure, so that if we go back to the product and refresh, we're now back down to 20 bottles. So it's always keeping track of your standard unit of measure. In this case, it's bottles. And in fact, if we did want to sell in a different unit of measure, so for example, we have a one-off customer and we're making an exception for them where we're going to sell them an individual bottle instead of a pack, we can still do that. So we're going to go ahead and select the customer. And in this case, this one customer is going to get an individual bottle. So notice the unit price. If you click into the quantity field here, you're going to see your units of measure displayed, and you can select which unit of measure you'd like to sell at. So I'm going to sell a single bottle, so 1 bottle, and you'll notice that the unit price automatically gets converted to the individual unit price from using the standard unit of measure and the conversion that we set up. And the same thing will happen if I wanted to sell a case, for example. So we have 24 bottles. If each individual bottle is $2, then we can expect it to be $48 for a case. And of course, I don't have enough in stock, so you'll see that red exclamation mark. But essentially know that you can you can switch between your units of measure when you're selling a product or even when you're purchasing it. So inFlow will do all the conversion for you. So it's one less thing to keep track of when you are selling or purchasing from your vendors. Okay, so I think that's it. As I said, this is a lightning webinar, so it's super quick. And I guess it's time for any questions that you guys have. And let's see.
So far, there hasn't been any questions. So
all right.
I'm not too sure if there's any other questions. We can maybe try to answer them now, or we'll get back to you by email. But yeah. So far, there isn't any in the chat.
All right. It was a lightning webinar, so hopefully it was straightforward. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about unit of measure or how to set them up, this is a great time. Or if you wanted us to demo anything to do with units of measure, or you know what, actually I did forget to demo one quick thing, is how to do it from the web app. So I'm just going to turn back to my screen share, just in case anyone is using the web app specifically. But the way that you'll do it is you'll open your account on our web app here. You'll go to your product list, and you will search for the product that you'd like to edit. So in this case, we're going to edit our soda pop product. And you'll see the units of measure displayed just over here. So it's going to be this the same process as before from the desktop app. So nothing changes there. But if you don't have access to the Windows app, for example, just know that you can go onto our web app and update the units of measure there as well. Similar process. And yes, as Carisha mentioned, we do have an article on how to set up your units of measure. If you're ever in doubt and you'd like the steps, do go onto our support knowledge base and check out that that article there. You can search for units of measure and it should pop up. Okay, so I'm just taking a look at some of the questions here. So Maxine asks, when you have more than one vendor, will inFlow pull in the price for that specific vendor? Great question. Yes, it will. So that is the beauty of the product vendors tab, is you can have multiple vendors here, and this is what you're going to use to keep track of your different vendor pricing. And the really nice thing about that is whichever vendor you select in the purchase order, inFlow will pull its specific vendor price. So if we go back to our purchase order here, I'm just going to unfulfill that real quick. And here we go. Soda Emporium is set at $20, but Pop Emporium is $22. So if I go ahead and switch my vendor to Pop Emporium, inFlow should update that. And I'm sorry, it looks like it may not have, but oh, and that's probably why, because we get an error here. So I do have to overwrite. Let's go overwrite there, and there we go. So the unit price gets updated with that specific vendor's price. So great question. All right, and yes, we've got Katie here. So can you clarify what the normal price field is? Absolutely. So the normal price, if we go back to our product info tab here, so the normal price is going to be the price that you sell your product to your customer at, and it always goes by the sales unit of measure. So in this case, our sales unit of measure is a pack. So what we want to tell inFlow is the retail price or the normal price of a single pack. So in this case, it's $8. So the wording here is you can add multiple pricing schemes. So in this case, my default one is called the normal price. It's just going to be the one that inFlow pulls by default in a sales order. But you can have multiple pricing schemes here. So it's a little bit confusing. Normal price, similar to retail price, but you might have another one called warehouse pricing, for example. And perhaps your warehouse pricing is a little bit cheaper. So depending on which pricing scheme you'd like to use in a sales order, inFlow will use it when you're selling your products. And again, it goes by the sales unit of measure, so by packs.
I was also going to mention, generally, that normal price is kind of a placeholder. You can rename it, and it's more often than not, it's just the price you sell your items at the most. So yeah, I think in order for us to make the pricing scheme the most generic for most people, it's just called normal price, but it's your most commonly used pricing scheme for selling your items. And then, as Daniela mentioned, you would add more. You can add more if you have like a retail price or storefront price or warehouse price, wholesale price, whatever it is. So yeah, you can just change it there.
Yeah, great point. So yeah, you can absolutely rename any of your pricing schemes, for example. And I know, and it's a great question, follow-up question that you have there. It's any advice on how to handle price breaks? And that's a really great question. Unfortunately, inFlow doesn't have tiered pricing in this case, so you wouldn't be able to offer that to your customers within inFlow, or rather, it wouldn't be automatic. You'd have to go into the sales order and update the unit price for that tier, for example. And what I mean by tiered pricing is if you sell your product in different units, let's say in a 4-pack, in a 6-pack, and as you buy more, you get a little bit of a discount on that for the more you buy. So that would be tiered pricing. Unfortunately, inFlow can't handle that at this time. But if it is something that you're looking for, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll log that as a feature request. But essentially, inFlow does a one-to-one conversion for the units of measure. So it'll always use your sales unit of measure and your retail price or normal price to determine what the individual unit price would be, or the standard unit of measure price would be, so that if you are converting on the sales order here, inFlow will always calculate it based on that one-to-one conversion. No tiered pricing in this case. You might want to use the discount field instead. And again, it would be a little bit manual in that you'll have to know that if a customer is buying 6 bottles, you normally give them a 20% discount. You'll have to enter in that manually. But yeah, sorry, I wish there was something more automated here, but great question though, either way. Okay, any other questions? So it looks like that might be it. I know there's a little bit of a delay with the chats and when we receive questions, but I think that's it for now. It is a lightning webinar. And if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the support team. We'll be happy to help answer those. And we'll be doing some more webinars in the future. Please reach out to us. Let us know what you'd like to for us to do a webinar on, and you can register for our future webinars on our webinars page. That's just on our website. You'll find it at the very bottom of our website there. But yep, any other questions, please reach out to us. And it was great to see you guys all here again today. And hopefully this was helpful to you. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.